Hello, listeners. Annika here. Today I'm bringing a very special guest to the radio waves, Deficio. Thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Not a problem.
So let's start from the very beginning of you and League of Legends. How did you come by League for the first time?
Well, we have to go quite a few years back. It was back when everyone was playing World of Warcraft, and I got tired of all the games, mainly World of Warcraft. And my friends and I were basically looking for a new game. And then we saw that Riot Games had released this free-to-play MOBA game. And because it was free-to-play, there was not really a reason to not try it. And we just started playing very shortly after release, leveled up to 30 fairly quickly and got pretty hooked on the game and just honestly kept playing it.
What about League of Legends as a profession? When and how did you start to consider this as a possibility for your future?
So when we got into season 1 and Riot and other tournament organizers started actually having tournaments put up, mainly online. So back then it was a lot of Go for Lols that was being organized by ESL. I'd already gotten to fairly high ranking. I wouldn't say like top 100, but definitely up there amongst, top 300 probably. We only had one server at that point in Europe and started playing, against the known people, Wicked, Ocelot, those guys back then, and just were part of random teams almost who just formed to play Go for LOL like one Sunday and managed to make maybe 4th place in it, and you won, I don't know, $20 or something. So that was when it started becoming at least a thing where you realized that you were part of the hardcore players, just because you were participating in these tournaments and you were making some of the better placements in it. And then when season 1 Worlds came around and it was in DreamHack, obviously you would watch it and you kind of realized that you were close enough to possibly go there yourself, but obviously you would have to work really hard for it. And that's, I think, where a lot of players realized that there might actually be more in League of Legends than just playing for fun with friends and play a few online tournaments. So when season 2 came around, tried to take it a little bit more serious, formed some semi-professional teams, try to see if we can go to DreamHack and IEMs and all these different tournaments. But I had a hard time really 100% committing to it at that point. Also because it was a lot of risks you would take, because all the teams you would form, there was a high chance like randomly they would just disband. If you had one really good player, he would just like suddenly decide, you know what, I don't want to play anymore. I'm going to go play, I don't know, some other game. He would just quit and you just suddenly have to kind of remake your teams over and over. And so season 2 was a mess unless you were one of the absolute top teams.
Do you still remember what was your first team or any of the people that you were playing with at the time?
The first serious team we created was with Björksen. Back when he was 15, Cruel Ultimatum. It was a Danish team we made. And originally we didn't have him on the lineup, but our mid laner, I don't remember if he left or if he was just not good enough and we ended up replacing him. We needed another mid laner and I'd met Björksen in solo queue. We've been fighting for the #1 spot on the ladder for some time. And it was just like, he was really good. He was playing mid lane. He was Danish. I found out. So it was like, hey, he fits it perfectly. I actually didn't know he was 15. I didn't know anything about him. It's just like, we had fun when we played together. And he joined the team and we started again playing a lot of these online tournaments, won some money on it, got in some finals with it, and it was working out pretty well, but no one was fully committed to it yet. So if other things came up, like it could be a job, school, it could be another game, it could be whatever. So even though we actually had a decent lineup, it was never going to be anything more. It did, however, allow me to actually build up a relationship with Björksen already back then, which obviously turned out to be a good thing later on.
What was the turning point for you? When did you really start to commit to League of Legends?
So the funny thing is, one of the big points for me was DreamHack Qualifier, where we actually ended up playing M5 back when they had the original lineup. And we had a very close series, but we ended up losing to them and they ended up going to DreamHack. And we obviously didn't because we lost to them in the quarterfinal. I realized again, I was close enough, but I wasn't really at the point I wanted to be, and I get kind of tired of the game. So I decided to kind of take a step back. Maybe it was better for me to work behind the scene a little bit, create a team, help out the team, manage a team, and try and see if that worked out, because there were so many good players to pick from, but there was just no real organization. when it came to all these professional teams. So I decided I wanted to create my own team where I wouldn't be playing, but I would just, again, as I said, manage the team. And that's where the first original Copenhagen Wolves lineup came from, because they were looking for a League of Legends team. They didn't really know who to pick up, and I got in contact with them. And I just said, you know what, just give me some resources. I'll find 5 players, and then we will make that team, and we will try and, see where we can take the team. And that's where we had the first lineup with like the Tess as mid lane, Garbro top lane, jungle was Svenskeren, AD carry was a guy called Gviston, and then XL Winner was our support. That was like the first original Copenhagen Wolves League of Legends lineup, full Danish, of course, that I was just in charge of. And that obviously later on became the lineup that qualified for the LCS as well, with some changes.
How about your family and friends? How did they react to your decision of starting to work more intently in the League of Legends esports scene?
So because I was working in esports as a side thing, it was perfectly fine. It was something that it was very clear I had an interest in it. And there wasn't really any full-time commitments yet there during season 2 when we made the lineup, or start of season 3, I guess it was technically. So it didn't become a big topic before the qualifier for the very first LCS in the start of season 3, where we had to basically make changes again. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to step in and play support, because we needed someone who could kind of calm everyone down and be a bit of a shot caller in game. Also because Bjergsen couldn't play due to him being 16 at that point. So once we actually went to that tournament with almost 0 expectations and qualified, I had to go home and be like, yeah, so this thing I've been doing on the side, it is now, by the way, a full-time job. I have to go to Cologne like every week now and play the LCS. So now it really became serious. And luckily, I guess because I've been kind of slowly working my way in, and they knew what I was doing with it, that I was playing before, and then I was managing a team. Still a little bit surprised that I suddenly came and said, you know what, I'm actually going to play now. I'm going to be playing in this thing called LCS, every week, get money for it as well, get a proper salary. And they honestly didn't have much to say. They were like, you know what, this is what you want to do. You made it this far already. It would be stupid of you, honestly, to not give it a chance. Obviously, I didn't really understand a lot of it, but they've always been very supportive with it. And as long as there seems to be a future in it, it's something they are fine with.
So in the end, you wound up playing more or less professionally for approximately 2 years, discounting the time that you spent as a Copenhagen Wolves manager, of course. What are your favorite moments from those 2 years?
Favorite moment. Yeah, favorite moment as my time as a professional player. I mean, I have to obviously go back to Poland, where we managed to qualify for the very first League Championship Series. So this is basically early season 3, just the start of season 3, ending of season 2. We went Poland and we played this obviously massive qualifier with, I believe we were 16 teams divided into 4 groups, and we had like what became the AAA lineup that was also in the LCS, were in our group, and we actually lost to them in the very first round. And it was one of the first games I got to play as a support, because I just kind of gotten back into it, and I used to be a mid laner, and I was like, first I was a jungler, then I was a mid laner, and I was like, you know what, we need a support now, and I became the support all of a sudden, could play like 2 champions. So obviously I was very nervous for it, and we didn't even properly realize what we played for at that point. We just came to this tournament, we lost the first game, then we won the next 2, we made it out of groups, and we had to play Millennium in that game that would decide if you qualified for the LCS or not. And Millennium back then, if people remember some of the old names, it was like Angersh, I'm So Fresh, even Taps, who's obviously still playing now. He was a mid laner back then, and this team had won everything online. Like these guys were probably the best team in the entire tournament coming into it. And we had this weird lineup with me as a new support, the Tessa's AD carry, Garbro top lane, Svenskeren jungle, and then Kautard, who's Swedish, was playing our mid laner. Because again, Bjergsen wasn't old enough. So we honestly had 0 expectations, and we were like, we're going to lose to these guys. But we ended up winning 2-0. I still don't know how. Just playing these most generic comps for like protecting the AD carry. We won. We just kind of surprised everyone, qualified. And that was massive, and I got to say fuck you, Bjergsen, so obviously that helps. And I guess the second one, Gamescom. Season 3 summer split. basically the playoffs, winners would go to Worlds. We were at that point not the favorites to make it to Worlds because we lost our top laner Extinct before that. But just playing Gamescom was insane. The stage would like shake when the crowd would go nuts, and there was just people everywhere. Like when you were looking out, only thing you saw was just people standing there watching the game. It was absolutely insane, and it makes you feel like a superstar.
I can only imagine that. But let's backtrack a little bit. Like we earlier established, before your somewhat surprising debut on the LCS, you were in fact the Copenhagen Wolves manager. What kinds of responsibilities does an esports team manager actually have?
So a manager's responsibility, it can be a lot of different things. Back, in season 2, season 3, it was a little bit different because you were often alone. It's just kind of you and the team, and you would help them with practice. You would, set up a schedule. You would help a lot with communication. How do people talk to each other? How do we break down certain problems? And you're in many ways a bit of a parent, I guess, because there's a lot of young players obviously coming in. A big part of it was when you were traveling, like you were basically the guy who had everything under control, and you would be able to organize everything, travel, hotels, everything. When do we have to be where? When do we need to be there? At tournaments, which teams are we playing? What are we going to play? Enable the players, and you would honestly do so many different things as a manager because it wasn't 100% defined yet what you needed to do. There wasn't that much paperwork like there is now with the LCS. So a manager now, as an example, is a lot more focused around, branding of players, paperwork with Riot, paperwork with different sponsors, I guess, in certain cases, and making sure gaming houses are working properly and all these different things. In many ways, again, you are a parent of the teams.
So you were like a father taking his children to League of Legends championships to enjoy the ride.
I mean, it sounds weird, right? But you are, again, you're organizing everything. Because your job is to make sure the players can just focus on playing. And your job is also to make sure that the players function together properly. So if there are drama, if there are issues, you can go in between. You can kind of become the guy they blame, and like you understand how to solve problems and all these different things. So it's a bit of a what would now be divided into like a manager and a coach and an analyst in the modern esports. But back then it would just kind of be all combined into one, which meant it was never good enough because you couldn't do all three things well enough. It was just impossible. So a lot of the times you would just do some of it and you would try to do the rest, but you kind of had to give up, and therefore the players obviously had to do a lot of things themselves and was a big part of making decisions and so on. So it's a lot of different things, but also again when it comes to being a manager, there's creating a team, right? And deciding, are these the right players? Do we need someone else maybe? How do we make this player work on this team? Contract talks. I mean, there are so many small things. It was insane.
You actually look really tired on the webcam right now when you're talking about that part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of stress because people weren't really ready for it either. You wanted to do it, and once you committed to it, all the other jobs and things just suddenly came kind of crumpling down, and then you had to basically try and be everywhere.
That sounds really exhausting. But despite of that, after your LCS player career, you returned to a managing position, this time for your back then team, NIP, Ninjas in Pyjamas. What were the challenges of being a designated coach beyond just being a manager? And what was that time like overall?
I mean, when I returned to a manager/coach position with NIP, it was always the goal to kind of work behind the scene and not just be a player. I only became a player because I wanted to create like a network in esports and kind of make a name for myself in a sense that I hopefully then could use to do something behind the scenes. So it was a very easy transition for me in that sense. But being both manager and coach, again, it doesn't work. It doesn't work now. That's why teams have both. And back then you tried to make it work, but it was very difficult because there were so many different things you had to do, and trying to coach as well with a completely new team being put together was very difficult, also because I don't have any coaching experience per se. So you would literally just go in and you would just talk about the game with the players. You would observe the practice, pause things, watch replays, break down what's going on with the players. And it was more just 6 people sitting together figuring out things than it was one guy telling 5 guys what they were doing right or wrong. So I was definitely more of just like a 6th person with the team. And then when it came to the manager part, that was the part I knew already, organizing everything, and I with a lot more sponsors as well back then. That was the part where I could really commit and kind of say, here's other things we're doing, here's what we need to do, and make it work between the players. Living in a gaming house in Stockholm, making sure everyone, had a good time there and everyone was happy with each other. So there's a lot of different things. It's honestly, it was a weird time because it was kind of in between the 2 LCS seasons. And I'd also at that point considered becoming a caster. So I was kind of like doing 3 different things and not really 100% committing to any of them, even though I was already there as a member of NIP. And in the end, you just took on too many things. Like that's one of my regrets if I think back. There's just too many things going on. Instead of committing to one thing, I tried to do all 3, 4 of them. And in the end, I just had to say, you know what? This offer about becoming a caster is too big for me to turn down, and I'm going to go with it. So that's why I ended up committing to one thing, luckily. Because if I kept doing the same, I probably wouldn't have gotten anywhere.
This offer to become a caster fell into your hands in early 2014. How did it actually happen?
So, after playing in Season 3 and not making it to Worlds, I told Riot that I would love to go to Los Angeles, where the World Championship were being held, and just help out broadcast-wise. Like, if they needed me for analyst desk or interviews or whatever, I would love to go. And back then, I'd done quite a bit already doing the shows, like analyst desk segments and different things. So they invited me to come join them together with a bunch of other players, and ended up going to LA for, I think, 2 weeks during the World Championship, and we did some different things. I ended up to do Champ Select together with their casters for the World Final itself, and the casters back then would be like Rivington and D-Man and Jad, and then they put me there next to them. And that was like my first big thing in a massive arena as, I guess, in some way a caster, even though I was only there for Champ Select, and then I would walk out after. And it went really well. So Riot kind of knew me there, and they knew I could be on camera, and obviously there were some issues in terms of language, but apparently I left a good enough impression that when Riot really needed some casters, especially some color casters or experts for the LCS after, they came to me and said, hey, you're one of the guys we're looking at. Would you consider, becoming a caster or trying out as a caster?
And in the end you did. You became a real caster.
Yeah.
And also managed to defeat the beast. That is the Danish accent.
Yeah, obviously.
Greatest battle of your life.
Probably, yeah. I would say becoming a caster and having to fix your accent, become more fluent in the way you talk. Also learn how to cast, by the way, because I'd never casted a game in my life before, other than like 2 practice casts together with D-Man and Quickshot. And then they were like, there you go, you're now on for the LCS week 1, and we're live. And I was sitting next to Joe Miller and just being like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues. And it's again, one of the things where you look back and say, it would have been better to get maybe 4 or 5 weeks of practice with these guys before you went on camera. But I'm also kind of happy this instantly put me on, because it made me realize, this is very difficult, and like there's a lot of criticism now because there's a lot of things you have to work on. So it just kind of made me work even harder to say, I need to fix all these problems, and it kind of sped up the entire process for me, which I'm very happy about now. Obviously back then it was fairly difficult.
Well, you've done an amazing job. And as I recall, your co-casters also gave you great praise in your Riot Games casters introduction video. But let's talk a little bit more about the first game you casted. Do you remember who was playing, and what were the highlights of that game?
So it was in the LCS studio we had in Cologne back then. We were doing, we used to have what we call super weeks, where we played like 3 full days of just games with like 5-6 games per day. And it always started with a Super Week, and that was like my first thing. I came on, I believe it was game 4 and 5 of the first day, together with Joe Miller. I don't even remember who played. I just remember being so confused and nervous because again I'd never casted a game before, and at the time I was just kind of waiting for him to ask me questions, and I would just answer the question. So it wasn't great. Like it was bad. It was bad in every way possible. That's the thing I remember from it. That it was bad. Like I was just you kind of got pushed into something that you weren't ready for, and then it was just kind of like sink or swim.
Well, you swam.
I was thinking at first, and then I learned to swim doing it.
Luckily, you survived. But as you established, adapting to the new role of a caster wasn't easy. What would you say are the most valuable qualities a caster can have?
Ooh, qualities for being a caster. I mean, obviously it depends a little bit on which role you have. We have the play-by-play casters who will talk all the time and hype up team fights and everything, and then there are the color casters, they're the experts who can break it down. But I would say there are probably some main things that you need for just being a caster overall. I mean, you need to understand the technique of casting. Breathing, talking, how fast you can talk, how fluent are you, vocabulary, all these things here have to be under control. You then obviously need the knowledge, either when it comes to being play-by-play, built around storylines of the players, history, and all that kind of stuff, and setting up your color caster. Or if you are a color caster yourself, you need to be able to break down the game on a professional level. Like there's nothing to debate there. You have to be good enough that you understand almost everything going on so you can explain it to the viewers.
So you need good memory, understanding of the game, and willingness to learn about the players.
Yeah, memory, understanding. You need to be very try-hard because you need to watch a ton of games from different regions. You need to watch Korea, China, Europe, write down notes, being able to refer to all the things you've seen, be able to explain everything you've seen. And then obviously the last part, I guess, is you need some sort of personality. Something I struggled a lot with in the start. I came off as very boring because I was trying to just focus on the casting part, but you have to be able to entertain people. I mean, that's the main reason people are watching, to get entertained. Obviously, some people want different things, but if you're just sitting there being super boring and your voice goes like super slow when you talk, then people will fall asleep. So you need to have something there that kind of entertains people. And if you can add all three together, obviously you become a very good caster.
So you could say a caster needs dedication, personality, and lots of try hard.
I think that's a lot of good points. If you can do that, and you can practice your speech patterns and vocabulary, and you're able to kind of hype up things, raise your voice, understand how to use your voice. It's a lot of things, right? But again, add all them together and you can be a caster.
Many casters seem to have something that you could call comfort lines. Do you have any yourself?
I don't specifically have lines I use a lot. I have a lot of words. Like I randomly pick a word, and for some reason I just use it too much for a few weeks, and then I'll forget about the word and use other words. I say a lot of "and so on" as my, for some reason, way of ending a lot of points, because it means the point is never closed in a sense. Like if I say team A is very good at team fighting, and then I, for some reason, just add in "and so on." I don't know why. It's just become a thing.
It sounds like a safety net to me.
In a way, right? And then I tell myself, don't say it. It doesn't add any value in there. So I often just find these words that keep coming into my casting, and then I tell myself don't do it, and then I stop doing it for like half a year, and I find some other word. I say super a lot, like this is a super good thing or a super bad thing, instead of saying it's a very bad thing or very good thing. For some reason I just use super. It's also, you just need to kind of remind yourself and write down when you're using some of these words, so you remind yourself to find different words.
By the sound of it, a caster needs to pay attention to quite a few things whilst on air. But obviously there are things that you need to do when you're off air as well. So what do you do as a member of Riot Games staff when you're not casting a game?
So when you're not casting, as a caster for Riot. At least I can only obviously talk from my experience as a Rioter. Basically, in the non-show days, we have office hours where we practice cast together, we watch other regions, we have meetings where we discuss what storylines we want to hit coming into the next week, break down the teams we have, make sure everyone is on the same page. We obviously prepare the show, so we talk about what kind of stuff do we want to highlight this week, what do we want to show with graphics or replays, and all these kind of things. And it takes up a lot of time, obviously. And then each individual person will prepare things on his own, so that once we go live, you don't 100% know what people want to say. You just know that I have maybe expressed that I really want to talk about this one specific player, and then I make sure either my play-by-play caster or Shocks, who is our host, will ask me at some point about that one player, and I can then say whatever I want. So it's honestly just a lot of it's a bit like having a school project, I guess, in a sense, and you just prepare a new one every single week. You use your weekends, and you use like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Thursday, Friday, you deliver the product you prepared, and you just get judged on it every week because there's always people watching, and they're always, judging what you're doing.
What do you think was your latest grade?
I actually felt like my casting last week was really bad, but it was a weird week where I only casted like 2 games, so it was strange. But I guess overall I'm doing pretty well, and that's the important one. It's what you do over an entire season and not just what you do in one specific game.
What about your overall grade for the whole last season?
So I follow a rule that basically says that I will never, ever, ever grade myself. I will let other people do that for me, because I feel like if I'm sitting here, I'm either going to sound like an ass for giving myself a high grade, or I'm going to sound like I'm faking it for giving myself a very low grade if people disagree on that one. So I'm going to let everyone else decide that one.
You heard him, listeners. So after this interview goes to my YouTube channel, you can leave your grade for Deficio to the comment section down below. And after some time, I will deliver Deficio the average of your given grades, so he'll know what you guys think.
Looking forward to it.
We have a deal then. So let's move on. Do you ever miss your times as a player when you're casting?
I almost never miss my time as a player. Because as I said earlier, I became a player because I wanted to get into esports. I wanted to make it a full-time commitment, but I wanted to do more than just playing. So I don't really miss it. It was my own decision to stop. It was 100% the right decision for me. Sometimes when you're at big events, sitting on stage gives you a feeling you can't really understand in a sense. Outside of that, no, I don't miss it at all. I think casting is a lot more fun for me, and I enjoy my work a lot. So I'm more than happy as a caster.
But what if you weren't a caster? What do you think you would be doing right now at 4:45 p.m. on a Thursday late afternoon? Where do you think you would be?
Right now, I would probably be on my way home in Denmark, probably living in Aarhus, second biggest city we have. And I would either study or have a job, but I actually don't know which one of them, because when I became a player, I kind of hit a point where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I hadn't really committed to anything. So it was a very good timing for me actually getting into esports, because I hadn't really committed to anything. So I wonder, it's a good question. I never really think about what I would have been doing, because again, I hadn't decided anything back then. Let's just say that, no, I have no clue.
Well, I guess all the better that you're a caster then. So, Deficio, to wrap up our interview, would you like to play 10 questions with me?
Yes.
I have 10 questions here that people have requested me to ask from you. The idea is that you'll answer with a couple of words tops. Are you ready?
Let's go for it.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Night owl.
What is your most hated champion?
Shaco.
Your favorite ice cream flavor?
Chocolate banana.
Flash on D or F?
Always on F.
Are you ticklish?
Quite a bit.
Who has the best lore on League of Legends?
I know absolutely nothing about League of Legends lore.
Cats or dogs?
Both.
Which champion makes you really tilt?
Shaco and Tryndamere.
Have you ever needed stitches?
Yes.
What for?
Different things. Not suited for broadcast.
All right. Final question. On lol.gamepedia, there is at the very bottom of your page a piece of trivia that reveals you wish that your co-caster Quickshot would give you a kiss. Has this wish come true yet?
No, but we came very close in Spain. But luckily it didn't happen.
All right, thank you, Deficio, for coming.
Thank you for having me.